James here with the Oracle Outlook for the week starting May the 18th, 2020. Thanks so much for tuning in and joining me for this week's video reading. I am so happy to have you here. This week I'm continuing to honor requests as they come in terms of deck systems to work with. So I just want to say thank you to those of you who have been asking to see either certain types of decks to work with, or you're asking to see certain layouts or spreads. I'm acknowledging a person who asked me if I would be willing to do 9 card readings at some point in the future. So I just want to say thank you for your suggestions. It's nice to know what people want to see, right? It takes the guesswork out of it to some degree on my end. So I just want to say thank you for those of you who have been making suggestions. And if you like to, keep them coming, right? I will take them in the order that they come in. Okay, so like I said, I'm honoring the request of a particular viewer this week, and this is a recurring viewer. So first, I want to say to Ishmael, who is the viewer that I am honoring this week, I want to say thank you for being a regular viewer and for sharing your thoughts on what you'd like to see and what you are doing in your own work with the cards. So I just want to give that little personal shout out. So this request was for doing something with tarot. So that is the deck system I'm going to be working with this week. Specifically, I was asked to work with a Rider-Waite deck. So I have a personal affinity for Rider-Waite decks because it was the second deck in my tarot journey, my tarot experience, and it opened up how I read the cards. So I have a very personal place, special place in my heart, I should say, for the Rider-Waite system. So the specific Rider-Waite deck that I'm going to be working with is a newer one in my collection, and it's one of my personal favorites. And that is, I'm working with the Smith-Waite Tarot, and the version that I'm using is the Borderless Edition. And so that deck was published by US Game Systems Incorporated, and I'll be leaving a link to information about the deck in the description box below. So again, I'm working with the Smith-Waite Tarot, Borderless Edition. And so now let's get to the table and take a closer look at what the Smith-Waite Tarot wants to share about the week ahead. And here we are with the cards on the table. I'm going to take a few moments to shuffle the deck. And just as I do every weekly reading, I'm focusing on the intention of having the information and the insight, as well as any guidance and advice that is going to be most helpful and beneficial to come through the cards regarding any experiences we have this upcoming week. I'm feeling one more time will be good. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut the deck. Fan the cards out. And I'm looking for 5 cards in the fan that are getting my attention as I'm continuing to work with lines of 5s in this space. Alright, so I have the 5 cards selected. I'm going to take the remainder of the deck up and I'm going to move that to one side. Alright, so now I'm going to adjust the cards. Alright, so that's the line. And so I thought for this week I would start with the card in the middle of the line. For me, the middle card always represents what's at the heart of the matter, or what we're being asked to focus on for the week ahead, or what the central issue could be for the upcoming week. So taking a look at the card, we have the Six of Wands. So for me, my chief meaning of this card is that it can represent some type of triumph, victory, or success, because there is a laurel wreath being held by the rider on the horse. So that usually is a symbol of some sort of triumph, victory, success. It can also represent some sort of progression or advancement because we have the rider on a horse. So there's some sort of movement here. And this can represent, moving from one phase. So it'll be very interesting to see what this card is, because the rider is moving away from this and moving towards this. So it'd be very interesting to see what those two cards are, because this could be a transition from this card to this card, right? And that could be something victorious. We're making some sort of progress that is leading us to some kind of victory. Okay, so that is one way of looking at the directional cue in the card. Another thing that this card is asking us to focus on, being that it's the middle card, is that this is a card for me that can represent work or business. Wands is the suit that can represent work or business, one of its meanings for me. And this card, when it comes up, could represent focusing on work that is rewarding, or that there's going to be some kind of recognition for work that is done, or that the need for recognition is an underlying motivator or underlying influence in regards to what one does for work, right? So there is that. So it could be that we are making some kind of change regarding work, and it's moving into work that we think is more rewarding. We either think or feel is more rewarding for us, right? So there is that. But it could also be that one is being rewarded or recognized for his or her work. Now, if it's not about work in the literal sense, this could be about something that we are putting work or effort into, and we are receiving some kind of either reward, and that could be internalized reward or an externalized reward. Usually for me, this represents like receiving some kind of praise, like we're being recognized for our efforts, right? So it could just be a matter of focusing on work, either in the literal sense or in the more metaphorical sense, meaning putting work into something in which you are going to be achieving some kind of reward, or that you are going to be recognized for that work or effort. Now, if we are doing internal work, right, because I use tarot as a tool of self-reflection, right? So in that regard, if we are doing internal work, then this card would suggest achieving some kind of breakthrough in that process. So now the obvious. If I go with the theme that I've been talking about over the last few readings, right, and talking about the external coronavirus experience or the COVID-19 experience, whichever term you prefer to use, then this card may be about achieving some kind of breakthrough in that. And of course, the obvious thing here would be the man on a horse would be people going out and maybe being around other people, because the other part of the image that I haven't touched on yet is that there in the background are other people who are like cheering the rider on. So this could be being around people who are cheering the fact that we are all, able to maybe even just a little bit more be outside, right? And so people are cheering that, they're celebrating that, they're looking at that as some type of victory, right? It could also be whatever the work is that you are doing or the effort that you're putting into a situation. It's important to have people cheering you on. So you may be the type of person who needs external validation or some kind of external support, right? So who's going to be your cheering section this week as you move forward doing certain things or performing certain activities, right? So that is the Six of Wands as the focus card. So now let's take a look at the card opening the line up. Oh, and this is interesting. Here we have another figure on a horse. So there is a repeated symbolism here. And so there's something about moving forward, making some kind of progress, right? Because we have a man on a horse. So now, this particular night, all nights in tarot for me can represent action, movement and some kind of direction, right? And very interestingly enough is that the Knight is also moving in the same direction as this rider on the Six of Wands. So they're moving to the right. So there's something about moving ahead, moving forward, moving towards the future, right? This Knight as an approach, because I tend to read Knights aside from action, direction, and movement as a core meaning, they can also represent approaches, right? So as an approach, this Knight is asking us to move ahead with the things that we love. This is known as the Lover card, right, for me. And so this is about maybe people being in search of, because I tend to look at this particular Knight as a spiritual seeker. So again, I talked about internal work, right? So maybe on a spiritual level, which is internal work. This is about we're in a space to maybe move forward in directions centering on what it is that we love to do. So at this point, or at this stage in your life, maybe the question is, what do I love? You know, what would I love to do, right? Maybe if your work is shifting or changing and you want to do something that's more rewarding or more meaningful, then maybe this is where you need to start, which is no accident as this card is at the beginning of the line. Start with asking yourself the question, what would I love to do? You know, what is the thing that fills me up? What would I like to do or love to do in service to other people? The Knight as a figure is in service to the king and the queen of the kingdom, right? So this is a service-oriented type figure, right? So it would be like, what would I love to do in service to other people? You know, it looks to me like the Knight is offering his cup. So what do I feel, cups being the suit of feelings and emotions, what do I feel I have to offer to another person or people? And keeping along those lines about the spiritual seeker, the Knight of Cups can be about searching for your Holy Grail. So it could be, again, this may be a more metaphorical journey this week, you know, but it's in search of what it is that you love to do or what you believe to be your Holy Grail. So now the other thing about this card is that, generally speaking, when it turns up for me, this could represent, you know, loving the idea of something and wanting to move forward on it. And here's the rub with him. The Knight, or this particular Knight, loves the idea of things, but his follow through could use some work. So it could just be a matter of saying that sometimes in some circumstances, or some situations, loving something is not enough. You have to be willing to take action and follow through on your actions, right? Now, if I go with this as a story so far, it's about loving something, taking action on it, and then getting to a space where you achieve some kind of victory, triumph, success, or a breakthrough, right? Wands as a suit for me can also represent intention and action. So intention is not enough. You have to have some actions that are in alignment with the intention in order to achieve the breakthrough that this card is talking about, or the triumph, the victory, or the success, right? It's not just about loving the idea. It's about what are you willing to do to move that forward. So now I will say this. Cups being the suit of feelings, emotions, and relationships, this may be giving us a heads up about interacting with people who are challenged with the idea of commitment, right? If we go with the idea that the person loves the idea of something but lacks follow through, right? So we may have to consider other people and their level of commitment, and then I do a flip with that, and then that may be also asking us to check our level of commitment, right, regarding moving forward this week or experiences this week, right? Okay, so that is the Knight of Cups. So now I'm going to turn over the middle card to see what it is that he's moving towards and what this figure may be moving away from. And here we have, I had a feeling this card was going to show up, so I already know what I want to say about this. Okay, so here we have the Knight of Wands. So again, now, two things I want to point out in terms of recurrence. So now we have two knights, right? Remember, my theme for knights can represent focus, action, direction, and movement. So here we have three cards. Remember, the Suit of Wands is also about action. Here we have three cards this week that are talking about taking action of some kind, right? But it's also about, with the two knights, it's also about focus, being focused on direction, right? In order to see some kind of movement and progress, right? Okay, so if I go with this card, just taking a look at the Knight of Wands before I take a look at the other cards surrounding it, the Knight of Wands, what came to me in the moment, and I'm putting this solely on the coronavirus COVID-19 experience. When I saw this card in my mind prior to laying out the cards on the table, the message that I got with is that change is in the air. That's my dominant meaning for the Knight of Wands. Change is in the air, right? His energy, though, he's restless, right? If I compare the two knights, this one is a little more relaxed, a little more easygoing. If you take into consideration the way their horses are in movement, right? This one's a little more relaxed, a little more calm, that kind of thing. This one is wanting to move ahead and move ahead quickly. So this card can represent restless energy, right? And I'm thinking about all the people who have been at home, who have been, self-quarantine, uh, doing the self-isolating thing, being on lockdown. There's a lot of restless energy, right? People are with the horses and knights on horses and the rider over here. People are really wanting to get out, right? Wands, again, two cards from the Suit of Wands. It could be about business in particular. So for some people, it's like people want to get back to work. People want to get back to business. Maybe people just want to get back to the business of life, right? But there's a lot of restless energy. Maybe a lot of people getting cabin fever, that kind of thing. The other thing that I was seeing with this card is that because of direction in mind, so I will confess, my direction, my sense of direction is very challenged. But with this card, I always see it as going west. So there may be something about restless energy and about going west. So it's making me feel like, and I'm here in the United States, and I always say that I only can talk about things from that perspective, right? So this card makes me feel like something may be taking place on the West Coast in particular, regarding the attempts or wanting to move forward or make some progression regarding reopening the economy. That's the phrase that we are using here in the United States when we're talking about getting more people back out into the workforce, or getting, businesses up and running again, or people feeling like they can leave their homes again. All those kinds of things. The phrase that we've been using is reopening the economy, or reopening the states, that kind of thing. So I'm seeing things maybe with states on the West Coast in particular, but there's a restless energy with this card that I'm seeing, and it's all around, people wanting to make some kind of changes. Now, some other things that come up with this card, since we're talking about change being in the air, there are three types of changes in particular for this night when it comes up. One could be that people are facing job transfers. I always see this with changes regarding employment, and usually the chief one is a job transfer, like you're being relocated. Along those lines, this card can represent an actual move. So there may be people who are moving or in a state of transition regarding that, right? And then the other thing would be a return to university. So there may be somebody who is actually contemplating going back to school, and with the situation with schools here and the school systems, again, in the United States where I'm at, that's kind of up in the air, right? So people may not be sure about which way to go, and that brings me to the fact that two knights are facing each other, right? So there may be people who are maybe feeling more restless or in that state of restlessness and wanting to move on, and then people who are feeling like, I'm not sure about that, and then we have the two knights facing each other, right? So it could just be two types of approaches that are maybe going head to head or about to clash, that kind of thing, right? And if that's the case, let's go with that as a scenario about people feeling a little more reserved, a little more cautious about moving forward, not quite sure how they feel about that, and other who are just like bursting at the seams to move forward, you know. And so what is the way that they can come into a greater sense of agreement so each party involved can have some kind of breakthrough, right? Or achieve some kind of success, right? Now, it could just be like if someone, because I don't want to lose sight of some of the other things that I've said, if someone wants to make some changes, moving from loving an idea or being in search of work that is more rewarding or more meaningful, then this card here in the middle is asking you, what kind of changes would you be willing to make, right? It's suggesting that you're going to have to change something. So what would you be willing to change, right? So there is that. Oh, and the other thing I will say, if you are wanting to make some kind of change regarding your work, then this card is asking you, what are you passionate about, right? So again, that brings this element about what would you love to do. But this card, Wands, is a suit of passion. So what are you passionate about, right? Or that passion needs to be the fuel that's going to help you move forward, right? And I'm hearing a song in my head called After the Love Is Gone, right? So first we love the idea, but the love may not always be there. So what would be the fuel that you would need to keep going when you feel like the love's not there? Because I'm hearing the song After the Love Has Gone. Okay, so that's what I'm seeing with these cards. But the chief message with this card is I was getting the sense when it popped up in my mind prior to it turning up here is that there's a lot of restless energy here this week. And so it could just be, just generally speaking, if you're feeling restless, what are you willing to do with that energy that's constructive, right? Okay, so now let's take a look at the card on the opposite side of the Six of Wands. Now, as I'm pointing to this card, I'm realizing what I said was one of the things I was talking about was, you know, the fact that the writer is moving away from this, right? So one message here could be like, if we want to make progress, if we want to have a triumph, victory, success, right? If we want to achieve some kind of breakthrough, maybe it's about, you know, moving beyond restless energy, right? And be willing to make some kind of movement, yes. But I was saying be willing to make some kind of commitment and sticking to it, right? Because this card could be like going along with the commitment aspect of this card and follow through. Then this card could be like the expression I think is like a flash in the pan, right? You know, what do you do when the fizzle is gone, right? Okay. So now let's take a look at what this particular writer is moving towards. And here we have the Three of Swords. Okay, so the first thing that I will say, there is a common meaning that I have for these two cards that are mirroring the middle card. So one of the meanings that I have for both of these cards is the move that I talked about here. So there may be something for a person who's moving. And with the Three of Swords, if that is a move, right, if that resonates with certain people this week, then this card would suggest there is a move where maybe you are not going to know other people, right? So if there is a job transfer or a relocation that may be connected to work, because this card would indicate on a working level or in a working situation that there may be some kind of severance, which means that I'm leaving a job, you know, I'm packing up and I'm moving on. So there is that. So somebody could be making the decision to leave their current existing job, and that could be, you know, you've made the choice, or in a larger sense that the choice has been made for you in one shape, form, or fashion, right? And I'll come back to that thought. But with that job transfer or relocation, you may be moving to an area where you don't know a lot of people or people at all, right? So there's that to consider with this card. That's one of its meanings for me. Now, if I come back to the idea where I talked about job severance, then this could be, you know, people who are feeling restless, maybe due to being out of work. So this could be like, I'm thinking of like people who were let go, people who were laid off, and who are, you know, unemployed right now, however that showed up for them, and it's like dealing with that, right? Kind of energy, right? It could also be that people are, moving towards, due to maybe changes with their work or job. Remember, this is about change being in the air, and moving towards uh, a greater sense of uncertainty. I'm looking at the gray sky and the clouds. For me, that all represents an air of uncertainty, maybe an air of confusion, air of doubt, and so maybe the breakthrough helps move beyond this period of uncertainty or doubt or something not being clear. It could also be that we are being given a heads up this week about communication. And so I'm going to soften what this card would mean for me. Sometimes this card can represent a confusion or some sort of misunderstanding because people have not spoken correctly or spoken truthfully about a situation, right? So if I go back to mirroring the cards, if there are changes being made, we have to be mindful of maybe needing to read between the lines with what people are saying, because the words may not be in alignment with the actions being taken. Remember, we have two cards here that are talking about actions, right? So words may not line up with the actions, right? And so now I'm going to go back to wands being the majority here so far. Remember, I said something about intentions and actions, right? So it could just be a matter of, if we are paying attention to the words being spoken by other people, it may be a matter of, do the actions line up with the words that this person or people are speaking? Because there may be a disconnect. Remember, this is about severance. There may be a disconnect, and the disconnect is causing confusion and uncertainty, right? Because you may be looking at their actions and going, wait, I don't understand because they said this, but they're doing this, right? And so tarot being a self-reflective tool, like I said earlier, could be a matter of, we may be looking externally at what other people are doing and seeing how their actions are not in alignment with their words, but that's also an opportunity for us to maybe take a closer look and asking ourselves, are my actions in alignment with the words that are coming out of my mouth? Right? So this week I'm going to invite you to consider, before you check other people, check yourself first. Okay. So that's what I'm seeing with the Three of Swords. So now I will say this. If I bring this back to the coronavirus experience or the COVID-19 experience, we may get news of an increase in cases, confirmed cases, because this for me is the illness card, right? And so that may be heartbreaking for people on a personal level, but it may be heartbreaking for the collective, especially for those people who are feeling restless and wanting to get back out there and wanting things to return to normal. Interestingly enough, if I read with direction in mind, remember I said this night was looking to the future. This night may be looking to the past, right? Besides looking to the west, may be looking to the past, right? And so people are wanting things to get back to normal, return to the past, because they loved the past, right? And for those people, this may be heartbreaking because maybe the realization or the breakthrough or the understanding here is that this may be, for some time, the new normal, right? And so maybe people are not comfortable with that idea or that thought or that proposition, right? So I'm seeing this with talking about the possibility of more confirmed cases. And again, I'm only talking about what may be taking place in the United States because that's where I live. Okay, so let's move on to the last card rounding out this week's reading. And here we have the Three of Wands. Okay, so the first thing I notice is that we have the number 3 repeating, just like we had 2 knights. Interesting how this reading has developed. We have 2 knights on this side of the line and then 2 threes on this side of the line. So the number 3 for me can represent growth and development, and it could represent productivity and being productive, right? And again, because the number 3 is tied to the Empress in the major arcana if you are fluent with tarot, right? So I go with that to help create meaning for the number 3. So the number 3 for me can represent, again, growth and development and productivity, right? It's about seeing results, right? So if we go with the idea that 2 wands are repeating, right? And now we have the 3rd, right? So the wands as a suit is ruling majority. So remember, it's about intentions and actions, right? And the only way that you can see results are the end product of any actions that you take, right? Every action will have a result, right? So it's about being productive this week, but also about seeing results. Now, where I talked about job severance with this card is about looking for work. So here we have a story here. It's about people maybe making some sort of breakthrough regarding severance from employment and looking for work and maybe gaining work, right? So that's what I'm saying. For me, this card could be about a job search. And so this could be looking in the newspapers, looking online, things of that nature. But it's about looking for work, right? The other thing with this card, it's about looking ahead to the future, because the person on the card is looking out to the sea, right? So this is about looking ahead, just like we have with this figure here and this figure here. And to some degree, this figure here, if we go with the idea that this figure is looking to the west, right? But if we go with the idea that the right is the future, then we have 2 figures looking ahead, and then this figure is looking ahead, right? So it's this idea about looking out to the future. And it could be like, even with things being the way they are at this moment with the COVID-19 situation or experience, this card is about the future looking bright. It's about prospects for the future looking promising or looking very, very good, right? So it could just be a matter of needing to wait. This card is also about waiting for your ship to come in, right? So this is about, a waiting period, something coming, and it's about something coming that could be beneficial, but there is a waiting period attached to that. Now, I will say this because I talked about this, possibly talking about the coronavirus the coronavirus experience. Then this could be about something taking place overseas, and we are watching, and I'm talking about as a person who's here in the United States, watching what's taking place overseas, right, in connection to this. So that would be the one card I might say that is broadening this out and making it more international because of the waters, right? Now, this could also be maybe something having to do with beaches if we go with the idea that this is talking about getting out, people who are feeling restless, being out with other people. Then this may be something having to do with beaches or other public places or spaces that are close to water, or maybe even an area. Remember, I talked about this is the West Coast, maybe an area that is close to water. So there may be something of that, and there may be, where the possible increase in confirmed cases would take place, right? But I'm seeing this as maybe a possibility of water, making me feel like with the Knight of Wands, kind of like a desert climate, but also maybe near water. So there's that with 3 of Wands. I'm taking a step back to see what else do I need to say about this card. I talked about the idea that it could represent looking for work. That's my chief meaning. So maybe somebody is achieving something in that regard. Maybe that's where the triumph, victory, success, breakthrough happens. They've been looking for work and they find something, right? So there's that. Oh, I know what I wanted to say. So this card can also represent somebody who may be in a position of leadership because there's only one figure on the card. And when I see the back of this card, or the figure, right, this can represent needing support. So we have this being repeated here. Remember, this was about a cheering section or people being in support of your actions or wanting to move forward, right? So this is about support issues too because of the back. It could also be about working through past issues because the back can also represent something that happens back there. Now, this would bring this card up. So it could be that somebody is working through or wanting to move beyond an issue where maybe there was some sort of confusion or misunderstanding, or even a sense of feeling like I was lied to or even betrayed in the past, and I'm wanting to work beyond that. Now, here's the rub with this. If that resonates with a person or persons this week, then the card here is saying, on some level, creating an energy where you feel like you have to do everything yourself, right? And then, you know, receiving support from other people can be a challenge because of that past issue, right? So sometimes what can happen is that you create a disservice for yourself because you don't allow other people to support you, right? Now, the flip side of that could be that you spend a lot of time and energy supporting other people, and this may be a week where you need to allow others to support you. And then the question becomes, would you be willing to receive support if other people extended it to you, right? And you may have to work through past history where that wasn't the case, where you were not open to receiving support, or that due to a situation or a challenge or a problematic experience, you created a belief that you could only rely on you. And so that belief may only get you so far this week, and you may have to be willing to receive support from other people. And on that note, I will go ahead and end this week's Oracle Outlook. I'm James Himm Mitchell, and as I wrap up, I'd like to thank you for sharing space here with me for this week's reading, and I look forward to sharing the same space with you again in our next video reading together. So until then, I am hoping that you have the best day possible, and I'm hoping that you have the best week possible. Take care.